Okay, let's look at a review of the product rule, the power rule, and the zero rule. This is what we're going to work on this week. Exponents, you're going to see a lot next year in algebra, and they're not reviewed, so I want to make sure that you understand them before you head on into algebra. So remember, with the product rule, when you have a base raised to an exponent times a same base raised to a different exponent, you just add them together. Again, the bases have to be the same. So looking at number 1, my bases are both x, and my exponents in 5 and 3. So I'm going to take this, and this is going to be x to the 5 plus 3, which is going to be x to the 8. Then you have a to the 9 times a to the 4th times a. Now, do y'all remember I told you what happens if it doesn't have an exponent? It actually does. What is it? It's a 1. Good. So they all have the same base. So you bring the a over, and you add the exponents together. So 9 plus 4 plus 1. It's going to be 9 plus 4 is 13 plus 1 is a to the 14th. Okay? Now, you're going to see it written like this or with parentheses, but it's the same thing. Now, again, I had taught you that when your base doesn't have an exponent, to go ahead and put a 1 on it. That k doesn't have anything. How many different bases do we have? We've got 3. We've got k, z, and y. So what we have to do is we have to add them up for each one. So 3 plus 1 is 4. 4 plus 8 is 12. And 6 plus 2 is 8. So your answer would be k to the 4, z to the 12, and y to the 8. Okay, now look here at number 4. Again, I have 4 bases here, 3 bases here, but none of these bases have exponents. So go through and put your 1. So what common bases, or what are all the bases that we have? We have a w, an x, a y, and a z. So I'm going to write those down. So let's look at the w. I have 1 w here and 3 here. 1 plus 3 is 4. For x's, that's the only x I have. So I'm not going to put the 1 there. Okay, I'm just going to leave it because we know that it doesn't have an exponent, it is 1. We have common y, so 1 plus 2 is 3. Z, 1 plus 4 is 5. Okay, so you would have w to the 4th, x to the 3rd, y to the x, y to the 3rd, z to the 5th. Sorry about that. All right, and then when we got into the product rule, we got into, well, what happens if you put a coefficient in the front? Do you guys remember? What did we do with the numbers 5 and 3? You multiplied them. So 5 times 3 is 15. So 15 goes in the front. And then we have our common base of x. And then 4 plus 6 is 10. So you have 15x to the 10th. Okay. All right, let's look at the second one. Again, our coefficients. We have a negative 8 and a 9. Negative 8 times 9 is a negative 72. So that goes out front. Negative 72. I have 2 different bases. I have x's, okay, and I have y's. So let's look at the x's. I have 5 and 4, and 5 plus 4 is 9. On the y's, I have 2 plus 3, which is 5. So you have negative 72, x to the 9th, y to the 5th. Again, you'll see them 2 different ways. You'll see them with parentheses and you'll see them without parentheses, but it's the same thing. So 9 times negative 2. Okay, here is the coefficient. Let's multiply that together. You're going to get negative 18. I got 2 different bases. I got w's, okay, and then I have, that's a z. Now I put my line through my z's, and there's a z. Okay, so let's look at the w's. We have 5, and then we have 1. 5 plus 1 is 6. And on the z's, we have 8. And 4, and 8 plus 4 is 12. And you're done. So you have negative 18, w to the 6, z to the 12. All right, let's look at one more. You have negative 10 times 5, which is negative 50. I have 2 different bases. I have an a. Let's deal with the a's right now. 9 and 7 is 16. And then I have the bases of b. Okay. So what's negative 3 plus 2? Negative 1. Okay, now, do you remember what happens here? I'm throwing a loop in here for you. Does anybody remember what happens when you have a negative 1? You got to kick it to the bottom. I didn't mean to do that. I screwed that up. We're going to do that right now. So we're going to kick this to the bottom. We're going to review this one tomorrow. So this would actually be negative 50a to the 16th over b to the 1. Some of you will remember that, but don't worry about it. We'll review that one tomorrow. That was my fault. I should have made that 5. All right, now, power rule. This is the only time you multiply exponents. Remember, the power rule states x to the a power raised to the b power is x to the a times b. So you just multiply them together. So for here, x, you have x to the 4 times 3, so you have x to the 12. Here you have y to the 7 times 3, which is y to the 21. Okay, here you just have 2 different bases. So you have x, it's like grandma, it's kind of like the street property. Grandma comes in and kisses everybody, so you have x to the 4 times 2 and y to the 2 times 2. So you have x to the 8 and y to the 4. Same thing here, you've got to multiply it by each exponent. So we have w to the 3 times 2, y to the 4 times 2, and you get w to the 6 and y to the 8. Sorry, the sun is starting to set and the trees are blowing in the backyard and giving funny shadows. All right, look at number 5. Now, different because none of these up here had coefficients, but this has a coefficient. Now remember, when you have a coefficient inside a power raised to another power, that coefficient actually becomes a base. And that base has to have an exponent, and that has an exponent of 1. So then what you do is you multiply the outside exponent by the inside exponents. So we're going to get 2 to the 1 times 2. We're going to get x to the 2 times 2, which is going to be 2 to the 2nd, x to the 4th. Remember, we can't leave 2 to the 2nd. What does 2 to the 2nd equal? Good. 4x to the 4th. Okay, let's look at another one. Again, we have a coefficient that when it's inside the parentheses, it becomes a base because it's raised to a power, so that it has an exponent of 1. So now we're going to multiply the 3 times everything in here. So we have 4 to the 1 times 3. We have x to the 4 times 3. And we have y to the 5 times 3. So you have 4 to the 3rd, x to the 12th, and y to the 15th. All right, now what's 4 to the 3rd equal? 4 times 4 is, good, 16, and 16 times 4 is 64. So this final answer would be 64, x to the 2nd, y to the 15th. Okay, now let's do one last one. Again, we have a coefficient that's inside the parentheses raised to a power. It becomes a base, so it has an exponent of 1. This z doesn't have an exponent, so we need to make sure we put a 1. And now look, we got to multiply the 2 by 4 different exponents. So we're going to have negative 9 to the 1 times 2. We're going to have x to the 3 times 2. We're going to have y to the 4 times 2. And we're going to have z to the 1 times 2. Well, 1 times 2 is 2, so you have negative 9 squared. X 3 times 2 is 6. 4 times 2 is 8. And 1 times 2 is 2. Okay. Now we're going to finish up. What is negative 9 squared? Well, negative times a negative is a positive, so it's going to be equal 18, x to the 6th, y to the 8th, and z to the 2nd. Okay, so that's the power rule. Now, the other rule that we did, the very last one, which was the easy one, which was the 0 rule. This is the one that we loved. Anything to the 0 power equals 1. Okay, so x to the 0, 1, no work involved. 9 to the 0, 1, no work involved. Look, these would all have exponents of 1, but what happens when you multiply everything by 0? You get 0. So everything to the 0 power, all that's going to equal 1. Same thing here. This would have an exponent of 1, but when you multiply everything from the inside to the 0 on the outside, everything will be the 0 power, which equals 1. All right, now let's look at this one. Again, we multiply everything to the 0 power, you would have, here, let's do this out for the heck of it. So this would be negative 6 to the 0, x to the 0, y to the 0, which is going to equal 1. All right, now let's look at this one. I'm going to put a 1 on that because it has an exponent. Now, what do you notice? That's not a 0, but do you notice something else? We have a 0 in there. So let's look at this. We're going to multiply the 2 times the 1 times the 0 times the 3. So we're going to have negative 5 to the 1 times 2. We're going to have x to the 0 times 2. And we're going to have y to the 3 times 2. Well, 1 times 2 is 2, so we have negative 5 squared. 0 times 2 is 0. X to the 0 is what that one would equal, and this is y to the 6. Now, what does x to the 0 equal? Well, it's going to equal, yuck, going to equal 1, but when you multiply 1 by anything, does it change it? No. So it basically just disappears. So anytime you have anything to the 0 power, when it's combined with any other bases, it just disappears. So negative 5 squared is going to be 25y to the 6. Okay, that was a review of the 3 exponent rules. In Verge, you have a test 1 through 10 that you just choose A, B, C, or D. It will be counted as a test grade. It's pretty easy, so take advantage of getting 100 on a test grade because we don't have that many test grades, and that 100 on the test grade this week and the 100 on the test grade that we're going to actually have on Wednesday as well can actually help pull those grades up. All right, I will see you all on Wednesday.